Hi everyone. So we will now move on to our next plenary session, which is on unlocking entrepreneurship, creating jobs at scale, a collaborative platform approach. Now, here we have today to moderate this session, I invite Ms. Ranu Bhogal, External Coordinator, India Platform, Lakaxia Foundation, and Director, Karma Daksh. To present the session, I invite on stage Ms. Kanika Verma. Is she not here? Okay, I will start over again in another minute. Please settle down. Hi, everyone. I request you to settle down once again. We will now begin with our next plenary session, Unlocking Entrepreneurship, Creating Jobs at Scale, a Collaborative Platform Approach. Now, to moderate this session today, we have Ms. Ranu Bhogal, External Coordinator, India Platform, Lakaxia Foundation, and Director, Karma Daksh. Ma'am, can you please come? To moderate this session, we have Ms. Ranu Bhogal. To present the session, I invite on stage Ms. Kanika Verma, Vice President, Development Alternative Groups. I would now like to invite on stage the panelists for this session. I warmly welcome Ms. Dipali Sharma, Director, Organizational Effectiveness and Partnership, ActionAid Association India. Next, I have Ms. Anjali Kumar Singh, Senior Program Officer, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Anjani, my bad. I also welcome Professor Dr. Shambhu. Is he here? Yeah. Professor Irma. And now I would like to hand over the session to Ms. Ranu Bhogal to take it forward. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. It's so nice to see almost a full house. Thank you. So, this session, as you can see in the brochure, is about unlocking entrepreneurship, creating jobs at scale, and it is, using a collaborative platform approach. So, the way we have structured this session is that we'll have a brief presentation on the approach followed by the Lakaxia supported programs. But before that, a brief outline. And people who have been around since yesterday would have heard in almost every panel, there is talk of unemployment, job crisis, the need to create more jobs, rural distress, climate challenge. So those things everybody is familiar with. We've also had sessions on gender, where women entrepreneurship was also discussed. And I remember Ms. Kanta Singh making this point that it's not just financial access, but many other factors that need to be taken into account to support women entrepreneurs. People who were active in the 80s will remember that the entrepreneurship development institutes were set up in India way back. The first one was set up in 1983, which is 40 years ago. So the criticality of entrepreneurship was recognized 4 decades ago. And yet, we find in a recent survey that was carried out by Development Intelligence Unit of Sambodhi, and they covered 20 states, 6 zones. This was done in October 22. And they found that 85% of entrepreneurs were first-generation entrepreneurs. This was telephone-based interview, and 15% were family-based enterprises. 1% of the rural businesses had no employees. 61% did not even have unpaid family labor. And only 10% had any part-time employees, and 26% had just about 2 employees. So when we are talking of enterprise development, job creation, this survey gives some very good insights. It also found out that only 11% of entrepreneurs had access to technology. Only 21% reported access to any kind of finance. Most finance was own savings or borrowing from family and friends. And marketing support was received by only 13%. So, these kind of findings clearly go to show that there's a huge gap that needs to be addressed. And apart from that, India, as we all know, is a complex country. There are huge social, economic, and geographical barriers. Geographically, remote communities face different kind of challenge in accessing government schemes and programs and business development services. And eventually, we all want decent work, the ILO convention. We want access to dignified employment, and which continues to be a huge, huge challenge. India continues to have, I think, close to 90% of our economy continues to be informal. It's contractual labor, informal terms of engagement, no job security, exploitative work conditions. So, in that scenario, we are starting this panel and we will be exploring some aspects in the 1 hour we have with us. And I'll now invite Kanika to make a brief presentation and then we move on to the panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ranu. Everyone can hear me clearly? Okay, great, wonderful. So I won't spend too much time on it, but it's important to sort of acknowledge in all its glory the complexity of the unemployment challenge that we're dealing with. It's a huge spectrum of unemployment, from sporadic unemployment, completely unemployed, to disguised unemployment. And if we have to look at breakthrough solutions, then we have to continuously think about what is going to happen to the 90% who are employed in the informal economy. And of course, with growing complexity around climate change, information asymmetry, and the missing middle that is not able to attract employment. Entrepreneurship is a response to this complexity, this complex challenge. In a very, very simple way, Amrita is her daughter's name, Mamta, is the face of what I would call an entrepreneur who can tackle the job crisis. She is a serial entrepreneur. She started with an ice cream manufacturing. Actually, now she has a namkeen making unit, and she's employed at least 15 people in her enterprise. She is the face of what we will see as entrepreneurship, where job seekers will move towards job makers. What we're here to talk a little bit about today is how a transition from a very projectized-based approach to a platform approach that is driven by collective action that can make this possible. Because we're dealing with an environment that's constantly changing, it's complex, a simple step-by-step project broken into silos is not necessarily going to be able to give a response. Whereas a platform-based approach, and we're hoping to sort of get into a little bit deeper as we move forward, which is run on the principles of open innovation, which is about innovative solutions being shared among different participants of the platform, shared infrastructure that is not just about knowledge sharing, but is about an action-based approach to collectively looking and learning and the changes that are happening in the dynamic ecosystem of entrepreneurship, and everyone coming together with a lot of trust and mutual accountability. We see this platform-based approach being driven by a very, very deep bottom approach. In fact, that's what the distinction I'd like to draw out between platforms that exist at the macro level that are somewhat disconnected from the reality. But this platform-based approach, if we really want to look at deep solutions, has to be driven by deep listening, solutions being co-created with the communities and the local stakeholders, while constantly learning and sharing together. It's a movement. It's a transition from a step-by-step approach that we're used to, where we isolate the individual from the ecosystem and try to sort of provide a band-aid solution. And I think the transition has to be more towards enabling a behavior of the ecosystem that enables that entrepreneurship to have access to those choices, which will need prototyped solutions which are nudging the system. And these are some examples of what these prototypes could mean in terms of changing the system. Can we take deep listening to enable a brave space for women to move forward with entrepreneurship, or having the risk to build non-traditional enterprises in communities, not a safe space, but a brave space where she can courageously walk into the future for herself and her family. The second is, how do you unlock finance? I think there's a lot of conversation on it, but how do you look at new ways of finance? How do you prototype solutions that are connected to the disconnected reality that exists? A nano micro entrepreneur in the informal sector right now, a lot of times, as Rano also mentioned, is a very need-based kind of an enterprise. But how do you enable finance that brings choice to entrepreneurs, to give them opportunities, to go for an opportunity-driven entrepreneurship? The third is that now that these prototypes or these solutions are coming to life, how do you make them accessible to the stakeholders in the ecosystem? A district entrepreneurship coalition, for example, that brings all the stakeholders together, that is very much connected to the micro communities, but also are enabling the policies, the government policies, to come together. And work for progress, and we'll talk a little bit about that later as part of the closing session as well, is one such platform which is a breakthrough in development practice. Started in India, it's now grown to Colombia, Peru, and Mozambique, with about 15 different networks as part of the platforms. It uses advanced social innovation tools that are available to each of the networks to create such breakthrough solutions. The way the platforms, or the different platforms of the program, is organized is the governance of the platform is actually a very facilitated kind of approach, which enables actors to work together for mutual accountabilities. Developmental evaluation, new ways of learning, and knowledge sharing is the fundamental base of such kind of a platform, where constantly we're looking at strengths and initiatives of people and not just focusing on the weaknesses and the challenges that exist in the ecosystem. Having an open communication channel that enables us to share collectively and to think collectively is an important aspect of it. Of course, there's a long list of recognition and awards that the platform has received. Within India, the Work for Progress India platform comprises of 3 networks, started by Development Alternatives, ActionAid, and now Access Development Services, who's just joined us recently. We're all working on the same challenge. We're all looking at different innovative solutions, and combining our efforts, we're looking at a transformative or a radical impact. So I'll stop here. Coming back again to the challenge and the context that we're talking about, the reality is that there are 30 million unemployed individuals in India, and that number has been growing rapidly. But there is a possibility tomorrow when 1 million new micro businesses with just 3 jobs being created can actually do this. And it's not that hard. If you look at it, if you just break down the numbers, it means 5 new enterprises in 1 year per village. So there is a possibility, but the question is, how do we go about and do that at that scale? So thank you very much, and look forward to the conversation, Rano.
Thank you, Kanika. So let me first start with Deepali, because given that ActionAid works with a very special focus on marginalized communities, and in a different session, Deepali, you did talk about it in the morning also. So what kind of opportunities do you see in the entrepreneurial space for these groups, especially in terms of moving from income-generating activities or self-employment to mindset to entrepreneurship. So if you can elaborate, and you can speak for about 4 or 5 minutes, you have the time.
Thank you, Ranu, and thank you, Kanika, because you have given us a quite overall landscape of the question that we are dealing with here today, the question of enterprise. And so, to contribute to the conversation, I would like to make a couple of points, going maybe a little bit deeper into the overall landscape that has been just shared by Kanika. So, a couple of things in that regard. One is when we are talking of enterprise or employment or creating jobs, basically building livelihoods for people. So I would like to look at it from a larger framework of the what we want to see as development. So livelihoods or job creation or enterprise building in itself is a goal, but we have to see it within the overall goal of how do we look at development. And when I say development, we mean the overall well-being of everybody. And again, when we are looking at overall well-being, I think we have to also look at several other aspects. And as rightly, when I say, Kanika, you have painted the landscape very clearly. So it's the entire systems approach that we'll have to look into. So, and which is where the intersection of the different systems, the social system, the economic system, the political system, which interface and interact with each other and create the kind of a good ecosystem or hampers the kind of building of the enterprise. So that's the first point that I would like to say. And in that regard, again, I will speak from the experiences of ActionAid working directly on the ground. So for us, that becomes the starting point. Because when we are looking at this entire systems approach, the starting point is especially for the most poor and the vulnerable, and these are the people, 90%, as we said, are in the informal sector. So without any backing. So how do we create that kind of starting with the kind of level playing field for them? Because that level playing field itself is not there. So creating that level playing field becomes a starting point for us. And how do we bring together these communities to create a space for themselves in this entire systems approach? So for us, we begin by social mobilization of the communities that we work with, and what we call it as a community-based approach, creating, building community organizations and community collectives where when they start discussing about this entire ecosystem, which will support them or which is creating a kind of hurdles for them. The third point I want to bring here is again a related point is we also know that many of these communities, when they are in the informal sector, they come with a historical kind of marginalization which they have gone through, and maybe which is why the kind of inequalities and the kind of employment crises or job crises, and they need to have this kind of discussion that we are talking of. So for that analysis, for the social analysis also, it is important that we look at who are those most vulnerable and marginalized, and which is where you have given some data, and I would like to also focus on women being the most vulnerable and marginalized. Of course, there are many other communities, but even within those communities, it is the women, and there's a lot of data you mentioned about SMSMEs. They themselves have their data, like what is the percentage of women who are owning enterprise? What is the percentage of women who are actually employed in this enterprise? So those figures are really, really very small. So how do we bring in those kind of social analysis for the most vulnerable who are there? So that is the third point. Then again, when we are talking of this most poor and vulnerable, largely into very traditional occupations. For example, we are talking of very small and marginal farmers, the landless laborers who are again working on the agriculture field, so landless laborers. We are looking at pastoral communities, whether we look at the fisher folk communities. So all these communities who are dependent on the natural resource-based livelihood, which has been the traditional livelihoods for majorities of the communities in India. So an important point in that regard for us is to know is inherently they are all entrepreneurs. You can take any example, whether it is a farmer working farming in his her own individual small piece of land. So he is inputting, he is getting the output, he is looking at return on investments, and he is planning his entire thing. So whether it is an individual only working or it is creating job for others or not is a thing. But similarly, you can look at pastorals community or fisher folk community. So they are inherently that spirit of entrepreneur because that is what they have been doing, and this is what something we need to really explore and build further when we are talking of creating more jobs. So that's the other important point. Now, coming to what is that we are actually doing about it. So, I mean, even as part of this initiative, this Work for Progress platform, we started with, as I said, collectivizing the women because women are largely contributing to the agriculture, but they are not recognized as farmers in that. But they are contributing majorly to the agriculture, whether it is in their small pieces of land or in others pieces of land. So we brought them together, created a collective of them, and in a span of 1 year, 2 years, today it is 4,000 women farmers who have come together. And a majority of them, 3,000 of them, have come together and registered a FPO, a farmers producer organization, which is where now we see the budding and the flourishing of the enterprise led by women and creating job opportunities more and more, not only for women but many other in their areas. So, but when I said the interface of the various systems, the systemic approach, it was not easy for these women to register a FPO. What are the systemic barriers, the institutional barriers which come into in all the spheres? It is in the social sphere, economic sphere, and other spheres as well. So I've been sharing this because for us that was the very big initial challenge when we were doing this work, that when you are registering in FPO, and this is all women FPO as I said, so all 10 members, women members who have come together are board members in that FPO that they have registered, and they have put up a stall here. Basant FPO stall is there outside. So the condition, the precondition for registering for this women to come together, whoever is registering a FPO, is that you need to have some guarantee as a land. So you should own land in your name, then only you can be a board member and register. That is the one condition. Now we know that in the Indian context, in the rural context, these women that we are talking of, none of them had any piece of land in their own name. So that was the first step and the first challenge that we faced. And so that is why I am again saying we have to go back to the social system. So we had to first engage with the families of these women. We had to engage in the communities, convince. I mean, it took a lot of time to convince their families to transfer the land in the name of the women. You can understand how difficult it is for that. But we were able to do this, and which is the reason for this is we that was our starting point to start those conversations. So we collectivized, mobilized the women, organized their groups, organized a larger community organization. So that kind of pressure, and they could also see that yes, something positive is happening for their families and for their communities. So all 10 families, I'm really feel happy to share that all those 10 families then transferred small 2 bighas of land in the name of their wives, and then after that they could only go and register the FPO. So that is the kind of, so it started with a social challenge, then it was an institutional, because the policy or the law does not allow that unless you are a landowner you cannot register. So those kind of so that is why I'm saying a systemic, the entire interface approach that we have to look at. And then of course there are a series of other things. So the kind of production knowledge which is required, the kind of because again here what we need to see, Kanika mentioned about the other biggest challenge, the climate crisis, because agriculture is also affected by the climate crisis. So it's not that we very good productive yield that you will get, and then adding to the overall climate crisis. So we are also promoting nature based natural farming methods. So how they coming together and creating avenues for the women themselves, and one of the initiative contributing into others. So they have created a series of small enterprises, whether it is a dairy, whether it is poultry, whether it is goat rearing, agriculture, then this organic pesticides and fertilizers they are creating. So this is all creating a kind of cyclic and reviving the rural economy in that sense. So also contributing to addressing the climate crisis. So this is the kind of overall. So I'm saying you have to look at from, as I said, social justice point of view, economic justice point of view, and now it also what becomes more important is the ecological justice point of view. And then of course the technology questions, the digital gap, digital divide, because now they have entered a phase where they are producing it, they are now starting processing it, they have now started packaging it, and then now they are into marketing. So at all these different phases, I mean, there are a lot of challenges which come because these are the women. So knowledge support to them, technical support to them, the technological support to them, even in terms of packaging and all. So now when they are packaging, they need electricity for the packaging unit that they have. But they don't have in the villages, they don't have very erratic, maybe just 1 hour, half an hour, the electricity will come. So how will they run their enterprise? So now we are getting into all those and looking into all the step by step challenges which they are facing. And but definitely, and again, the other very positive thing is just today in this group, I mean, some other participants, we had a discussion. They also have similar groups in the same area in Bundelkhand area, because this whole work is in the 3 districts of Bundelkhand. So they shared that there are other groups, women groups, who are doing cultivation and farming. So they would like to link with this group now because they have already built this enterprise and all. So we already see a kind of scaling up of the job opportunities and the employment opportunities for many more women in that area. So, I mean, that is how.
Yeah. Thank you, Dipali. And what Kanika mentioned about the District Entrepreneurship Coalition, that has also created a very good space for different players to come together and discuss the common challenges that they are facing and the solutions also. So I was fortunate to attend one such meeting, and it was very nice how this one of the guys who was a trader, he also came in that meeting, and he wanted to link up with the FPO women, and he said, okay, I can also get involved in the marketing. And I think that's what you guys are also exploring. How do you tap into the local market potential? Because right now, if you look at the country as a whole, I mean, there's so many FPOs, there are so many of them are producing masalas and processing dals and pulses, and marketing becomes the biggest bottleneck for them. Their capital gets locked there. So exploring the local markets and tying up with the local retailers is what you are also trying to do. So that's kind of addresses the marketing bottleneck challenge. Thanks, Dipali. Anjani, I'll come next to you. And you have been passionately talking about scale. I remember in our earlier discussions also, you said that all these small nano enterprises have to become larger and be supported to be scaled up so that they also create job opportunities for others. What kind of mechanisms, processes need to be brought into place to facilitate or trigger that expansion?
Thanks, Rano. And at the outset, I would like to thank the whole Access team for organizing this event year after year. And even during the COVID time, they found a digital system to bring us all together. So thank you, the Access team, for doing it. And it's fascinating that we meet in this forum. Like to whom we have not met, 5 years, 10 years and all, and we come and we meet here. And thank you, Kanika, for making a wonderful presentation and setting the context. Coming to, the question, Ranu, that you asked, I feel job is the central focus for the whole economy. I think it's a topic which both the political leader as well as the economist, everyone talks about, how do we create more job? And it's a puzzle, for me, for a country like India, which is one of the brightest spot in the large economies, one of the fastest growing large economies. India is a country, and Ranu, you mentioned, thought about the entrepreneurship, even 40 years ago, how to create more entrepreneurship. India is a country where there is a very decentralized financial ecosystem which exists. You go to the villages, still you'll find functioning bank branches. India is a country which runs one of the largest employment generation program in terms of the Narega, where huge amount of funding, billions of dollars, is spent for creating more employment opportunities and all. In spite of having such a large, wonderful ecosystem, still there are large number of people who are not able to get the kind of job that they wanted. It's also it is, puzzle becomes much more stronger when you talk to the industry side. They would say that, oh, they're not getting the kind of people that they wanted. They're not getting enough people. Whereas on the other side, if you look at from the citizen side and people's angle, if you put up a one advertisement for any job, and I think the number of applicants that you'll get, it becomes a difficult to even shortlist out of that and all. So this whole paradox which exists in the country, I don't know what could be the solution, but I think as a country we need to certainly find a solutions for how do we create more job, and why we are not able to create more job in spite of having such a wonderful enabling ecosystems and all. I think there are some which could be within country. There are some other external ecosystem, be it, I think we had a whole scenario of globalization. From there now, a lot of countries are becoming protective, and looking at more inward rather than looking outward. The whole technological disruptions which are happening, where a lot of AI and all, so they would kill certain kind of a job. They might also create job opportunities in some different kind of a space and all. So I think we need to be taking into account all these external factors which also impacts the job creation in a particular country. But coming back to the again back to the real client in the rural areas, women, people at the bottom of the pyramid, I would say one area which needs to be really looked at is the financing part of it. I would say, as a country, we are under investing among the entrepreneurs. Financing might be not the sufficient condition, but it's certainly a necessary condition for any businesses either to set up or even to grow. I have seen in my own practical experiences. I was in the forenoon. I was in a conference with the NRLM, and I was listening the stories from various women and all. And I have seen the moment they get access to finance, what is called dimag ki batti jal jati hai. They automatically get the several ideas, that what to do with that money, how do they set up the business, or how do they take to the next level and all. I'll tell you very clearly, I myself have seen a SAG member who was selling saris, carrying over head to different villages and all. The moment she got the enterprise financing loan of around $2,500, like, which is around 2 lakh rupees, she set up a store, and then hired 5 other women who is supporting her in her outreach sales programs and all. Same thing I have seen in the stitching business. The women who was stitching earlier alone, the moment she got the enterprise financing loan, she bought 5 more machines, and now she is getting the order at bulk, stitching it, supplying it to the ready-made garments stores and all. So I think and this was all possible because one moved from pure SAG bank linkage to the next level of enterprise financing, and these women could access a higher dosage of capital. I think that's a super important, to invest more in terms of, we all celebrate what has been achieved so far, but at the same time, there is need to do more. In terms of the financing, I would say both SAG ecosystem as well as microfinance ecosystem is still, just they're fulfilling the needs of the basic need. because the large number of financing is below $1,000 or even less than that. It's like less than 50,000. Even we talk about mudra loan, but even the large number of loans in mudra are of less than 50,000 rupees and all. We need to expand the access of the next two categories of loan, which is Tarun and Kishore. How do we make sure that Tarun and Kishore, which is like a 50,000 to 5 lakh and 5 lakh to 10 lakh rupees, how do we expand and make that accessible to large number of women or large number of other entrepreneurs and all? Unless until that happens, I think any other interventions might not, lead to creation of more job opportunity. I think the way job economy is changing, I'm not sure how much the formal job in the formal economy. I think the way gig economy is growing, the way other kind of the whole labor market is becoming more fluid. I think we'll have the nature of the job itself will change, and that's where these kind of a self-employment opportunity. I mean, some people though might say that the whole disguised employment and underemployment which was existing in the agriculture sector, it might just spill over in the self-employment space as well. But still, I don't see, other than the self-employment, there are any other options to create large number of jobs in a formal, job market and all. So I think the way is to go about the self-employment, but we need to finance more to it. My last point, I think, which probably the Sambodhi study that you referred, I mean, other than finance, technology and market is other big challenges and all. And there I would say that, I mean, we talk about, and again, India has become a third largest, what is called, the unicorns. So large number of startups have become unicorn, but all these are available to only enterprises which are of a higher order. I think this whole startup ecosystem does not exist for the people at the bottom of the pyramid or entrepreneurs which are sitting at the at the bottom. What kind of a these startup ecosystem which exist for, or incubation and acceleration system which exist in a country for startups, is also created for a smaller and nano entrepreneurs. I think that is where, and I think the Kanika's work, that setting up this entrepreneurship coalition, district coalition center at the district level could possibly, play a very significant role in terms of triggering, spurring, the large number of mass entrepreneurship among the, at the bottom of the pyramid. I think that is the process, a way to go about, and I think, we need to do more and more, work in that directions.
Thanks, Anjani. I'll just add to what you said about financial access. And I mean, I was listening to another session on the particularly vulnerable tribal groups yesterday, and there's a paper I've written on the ultra poor livelihood challenge. Now, apart from finance, and which Kanika's presentation and the work for progress approach also captures, people need investment in terms of your time, listening to them, giving them confidence, because they may be bubbling with some ideas, but they, apart from access to finance, they don't have the confidence to even take that jump and start an activity, because the fear of failure is very high. And what Deepali was referring to earlier about especially people from more marginalized sections of the society will have that psychological barrier of, so they would rather say, okay, if I get a wage income and I get food at the end of the day, I'm fine. This thing of becoming an entrepreneur, and I'll request Kanika later on to elaborate a little bit on, that is, there is an element of risk. If you're going to take a loan, or if you're going to invest your own money in some enterprise with no certainty of a return, you will rather go and work for a landlord in the field and get your wage income. So, that investment in terms of working with them, developing the business idea, giving them the confidence, and what we call hand-holding support is also very, very critical, apart from making financial resources available. And that's particularly true of the more marginalized groups of the society. Shambhu, I'll now come to you. You recently led a research where you captured the journey of entrepreneurs in the Work for Progress program area. There are two questions for you. One is what are your higher order insights from this research? And also, what are the missing pieces you picked up that need to be in place to address the job challenge? So, slightly longer set of two questions for you. Thank you.
Thanks, Ranu. Yeah, so just to build on some of the arguments that have been made, and to illustrate, I think there was a discussion yesterday in the fireside chat where Arun Mehra was talking about the goals of development. It is technically possible to reach the goals of becoming a 5 trillion economy, etc. But that can come at what is now being understood as jobless growth. So, just to give an example from something that happened probably a couple of weeks back, 2 states of India have had massive events to attract investors. And you look at the ratio that is being talked about. So, the investment part is often spoken about a lot, but the jobs created is not spoken about. So, in Gujarat, 26.33 lakh crores of investments. Jobs is not there, but one particular conglomerate had invested 1 crore per job in the next 5 years. So that's the ratio that you're talking about. Tamil Nadu, a different state, so 6.64 lakh crores. So you see anywhere between the investment to job ratio is between 0.25 to 1 crore per job. Now, this is clearly not the path for what we talk of in areas where many of us are working. Just contrast this with the recent data that has come about with regard to CSR investment. Only 2% of the CSR investment, according to a recent IDEA report, goes to aspirational districts. So, this whole idea of inclusion needs to be understood in terms of this, what India might be going through a severe jobless growth regime. Within this, I think if you look at the enterprise ecosystem that exists, there's a lot of focus and a thrust towards entrepreneurship, the startup ecosystem, Startup India, and so on. But as as we are understanding, even the categories of micro, small, and medium have changed. We are now have to look afresh with this category of the nano enterprises in a very different manner. And I think the challenge essentially is to look at frames by which we can understand nano entrepreneurship today. And I think we're not helped enough by the kind of literature from the academic side also on people studying this phenomenon. Ajit is probably somewhere here. So I think he had done a study on grassroots entrepreneurship in 1996. And if you look at what has happened in the last 30, 40 years, I don't think we have enough insights on what is happening to these local entrepreneurs, their entrepreneurial abilities, their ability to growth, etc. So while we can draw some insights from the startup ecosystem, I think we need to look at this afresh. And this was the challenge that we had when we were trying to understand entrepreneurship or inclusive entrepreneurship in 4 underserved districts of Uttar Pradesh and Madhya Pradesh. And I think what we tried, in some sense, there were 2 parts of it, and I'll just briefly illustrate a framework which I think is trying to help us push ourselves in a slightly different direction. So we used a 4E framework, which is essentially saying we have to understand the journey of the entrepreneur, the individual entrepreneur, as very different. This women, young women in a disadvantaged community. Then the growth of the enterprise over a period of time, which includes the fact that they have also gone through COVID with a disruption of a high order. What's the kind of resilience that they've shown? Some of the normal metrics of enterprise growth is possible. The important contribution of the ecosystem, it could be the local NGO, it could be the ability of the NGO to enable these entrepreneurs to access some of the schemes that exist, which otherwise are out of the reach of many of these entrepreneurs. And an important part which we realize later is their contribution to the local economy. And sometimes we miss this element. So the scale is not necessarily in them going and looking at, I've done it in 2 villages, I'll go to 5, I'll go to the district and beyond. But in terms of the scale can happen in terms of what their contribution to, providing goods and services in the local area and contributing to the local economy's growth, probably in terms of jobs and other things as well. And I think the last part is something we weren't able to capture enough, but I think this is an attention that we should be paying much more emphasis on when we're looking at a new metric to look at entrepreneurship for the nano enterprises. Within this, of course, we did find several parameters which were very interesting. One was innovation, but innovation not just in terms of technological innovation. Entrepreneurs, when they were introduced to this idea and they got the bug, as even Anjani was suggesting, start thinking in a very, very different kind of manner. We were surprised by the access of information through YouTube and other channels, their ability to self-learn, their ability to take risk, their ability to experiment. And I think that unlocking of the creative potential of the local people is something which we probably need to make more of an emphasis. Therefore, moving away from a supply side, supply of these are the schemes, these are the things you should do, towards creating a demand for entrepreneurship and providing a safe space where they could try out some of these ideas is something that really went much, much further. Once they were able to take up some of these ideas, we noticed some of these women and young people, they didn't stick to one particular enterprise. They have been trying to diversify not just their enterprise, they've been thinking of the next idea. An interesting part is the approach also enabled them to share their experiences with others so that others could also try this out. There have been a few cases where they have seen imitation, but they're not threatened by the imitation in the local area because they know that there are perhaps a few steps ahead in the skill regime, so to speak. Now, I think within this, there are certain other kinds of parameters, and we've also found, for instance, the important role that the family plays in the growth of the enterprise. Sometimes the family can play a negative role as well. And what we also noticed in the case of women was, one could do a separate story on it, which is the ideas that they bring from their original family before they get married, which we could call it the Micah stories. So they've tasted a bit of enterprise or something in their original area. The husband is doing carpet weaving, which is a declining trade. They're now able to bring those ideas and support them. A disadvantaged woman trying to do something was not able to get any support from her, her in-laws family. But once she was able to do something, it's her mother's family which gave her a shot, cooler and so on. So this ecosystem support is not just about NGOs and others, but the family plays a critical role as well. So I think the point essentially is what we have started is only the beginning of looking at entrepreneurship differently. And I think this requires us to rethink many of the things that we've been conventionally doing, including, I guess, what Ranu spoke of entrepreneurship being driven from academic institutions. And I feel that if we are talking about the next wave of entrepreneurship in India, it has to come from the rural areas. And it has to also be situated in rural areas. It can't be situated in an IRMA or, an IIM, etc. The reach, that's okay for certain kinds of enterprises who are probably educated and who may have certain kinds of skills. It is not that the academic institutions don't have a role to play. I think they need to play a role in enabling the setting up of rural incubators. And I think that's a direction that we all need to collaboratively invest much more. It could be in collaboration with the state rural livelihood missions, but it has to work out somewhat differently if we have to meet this enormous challenges in terms of jobless growth that India is facing. Thank you.
Thanks, Shambhu. And when you said that the universities of learning have to shift to rural areas, I was reminded of Bankar Roy's work in Tilonia. That's exactly what he did, and that must be, 50 years ago? When in Rajasthan, in this village of Tilonia, he got together the local people and developed, and a lot of other such examples do exist. So I think you are absolutely right that we need to go back and learn and develop ideas with the communities, with people. So and I think that will also have a better learning value from peer-to-peer learning, from a professor to the rural youth, from one rural youth to another rural youth. The learning is of a very different nature. You want to say something, please?
Well, I just wanted to share, this is available on DA's website. It's called Fireflies of Social Change. I think that's a beautiful phrase which we borrowed from Arun Mehra. So I think we're not talking of a, hierarchical structure of the way these enterprises are going to grow. They are like fireflies around, and each one is a firefly of social change. And I hope we can work towards creating more of them.
I'm mindful of the time. We have 11 minutes, and I have Kanika, and then we have one last quick round. So, Kanika, you have been in this field of entrepreneurship forever. As I understand, you eat, drink, and sleep entrepreneurship. So, I want you to speak a little bit on what makes an entrepreneur and what kind of entrepreneurial ecosystem needs to be built to trigger and nurture entrepreneurship. Because there's a lot of confusion between income generation activity and enterprise and enterprises for creating jobs. And so just unpack that for us a little bit. Thanks.
Thanks, Rano, and thanks, panelists. I think you've sort of already said quite a bit about what I was going to say, so it's much easier. But yeah, I think there's a need to sort of unpack entrepreneurship a bit. And I think the reason I eat, sleep, and drink entrepreneurship is because I had the opportunity of being one. And it used to baffle me that a country that's so entrepreneurial is not able to sort of become, it's not growing as much. It is entrepreneurial, enterprise is there, they're just very, very invisible. And it's very, very subsistence and need based. So in the informal economy, you have all kinds of examples. But the challenge is that they've been set up because there's a lack of another opportunity. So how an enterprise becomes an enterprise in a true sense, if we want to have the kind of enterprises that will create jobs, the kind of enterprises that Anjani was talking about, which have the need for $1,000 and plus, is when you have entrepreneurs looking for opportunities. And there are 4 things that I've seen in common. Whether it was my own journey to a lot of the women entrepreneurs I get a chance to speak with. One of the things we do is we do these comic workshops to create that sort of brave space, safe space for women. And without fail, every single time the woman comes and says, no one has asked me about my journey. And entrepreneurship is a journey. Being an entrepreneur is a journey. And one of the big things that when we enable them to sort of think about themselves and the enterprise journey, they become much more in tune towards being adapted. And that's what makes an entrepreneur. I think the second thing is that it's risk-taking. I think a lot of us talk about. I mean, credit opens up so much, but it's also data intelligence that opens up so much, the ability to do that. One of the women entrepreneurs that we've recently worked with, very interesting, started with a beauty parlor, has now set up a mini mall in a village in Mirzapur. And what would she start doing is that every time someone would come to her store, she would write down what she didn't have. So she was picking up all this intelligence. Our data is being mined all the time. There's so much intelligence that's out there for consumption. But what happens when someone goes to a rural business, a store? No one has any idea. So I think enabling them to understand their market, to pick up that data intelligence is going to be key, and how digitization will help us will be a big thing. I think the third important point is that if you look at where the world is moving towards, we are moving towards actually more informality. We are no longer going to be defined by the existing structures. So we actually have an interesting opportunity to think about. I don't think I have the answers yet, but collectively we can, and I have a strong belief that communities have the answers. Strong belief of How do you create not a safety net for gig work or for informal work, but an ecosystem that enables them to sort of do more and more of that? Like if you look at young people right now, they're doing multiple things. One has a YouTube channel, the other one has this. And how do we use that self-learning mechanisms? How do we use the different channels and enable them to continuously do that will be a key. And the last point on that is, if we have to also look at the climate challenge, global supply chains have to move towards local solutions. And my favorite example is a namkeen making unit. The demand for a local namkeen making unit is more than a big brand unit. So demand is there. We just have to move towards unlocking this entrepreneurship.
Thanks, Kanika. And from my little travel that I've managed to do in the last 6 months, this myth that entrepreneurship is something that is only possible for people from a certain class background got busted. It's everybody has an idea. It is how do you create the right word, the ecosystem, the spaces for those ideas to bloom and blossom. And that actually brings me to my last question, and we have 5 minutes. So we started late though, but unfair to this panel. Anyway, so this conversation is about a platform approach, a collaborative platform approach, and all of you have used the word ecosystem. It is not possible for one entity to create an ecosystem. An ecosystem, by definition, has multiple players, right? So, how do you visualize a collaborative platform approach to create this ecosystem? Any ideas? And we can start from you, Shambhu, and then we can just.
Yeah, to borrow something we've been trying in a different space on agroecology, I think it would help to try and use different kinds of words. One of the things that we would emphasize is we want to create a learning alliance. And I think the interesting thing about that is it emphasizes that every actor in the ecosystem should learn. And there's an emphasis on social learning. So otherwise, it tends to be the one who is more powerful trying to drive the platform. And equalizing power becomes an important element.
So, taking on from the example which I was mentioning of the Work for Progress platform in Bundelkhand that we are supporting, I think it's very clear that it's only a collaborative platform approach which can help. And again, to repeat what I said, it has to be in all the spheres. So whether it is social, economic, political, and when I say social, definitely whatever local institutions which are there, you have to engage them, because it's we are talking of the social, changing their social relationships. We will need to bring in the power balance. We need to create equality. So you are definitely hitting on the power imbalance which exists. So social, whatever organizations which exist, you have to engage with them. There are many caste-based organizations. There are many religion-based organizations. There are many men's organizations, women's organizations, youth organizations. So that is one you have to engage with. So to address the social equations. Then, of course, there's a lot of institutional in that space. So in this Work for Progress, we have engaged with a lot of different departments. So whether it is the agriculture, whether it is horticulture, whether it is fisheries or vet department, or even women and children department, industry, labor, the panchayat, the block administration officers. So everybody has to be brought together. Plus a lot of for technological inputs and technical inputs, universities and institutes. So we are collaborating with them. And the effort is to bring all these different stakeholders together on one platform. So which is why we can address it in a holistic manner. And just one more point. So again, to say we are now not just looking at enterprise, we are looking at building the local economies, green economies, and solidarity economies. So how do we build it in the form of collectives, cooperatives, or this FPO kind of organization? So we can also socialize the risk. and socialize the profits. So, I mean, it is not individual which will be suffering if there is a risk, because enterprise involves risk. So, if it is a collective, so that is why we push for more collective and cooperative based solidarity economies and green economies.
Thanks. And I mean, I think you rightly mentioned all the line departments because they all have their own targets to fulfill. So they are more than happy to have a collaborator to help them realize their targets. And I've come across the District Industry Center making available Silai ka machine and providing training. And, so one can leverage those relationships very effectively. Yeah, Anjali.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, we are now started saying that let's take a whole of society approach, to do it, and within the government, we say whole of government approach where multiple departments come together, to the cause of building entrepreneurship and inclusive entrepreneurship and all. But as a foundation, I think we are pivoting quite a lot on the whole self-help group platform which exists in the India, under the aegis of Department of Rural Development, and it's because there are almost 100 million women who are part of that network, and we do see any solution at the bottom of pyramid. Probably using that platform, could get quite a scale, there. So we are pivoting there, and we see that has a potential to provide the scalable solutions, also in terms of jobs, employments, access to finance, access to market, and technology. I mean, technology is I would say still, while the world has leapfrogging in terms of use of technology, in all these development programs is still lying behind in terms of how to you make best use of technology, and we need to find more tech-based solution, especially just very a small, these all 10 crore women who are part of this SSG network. They do so many transactions, financial transactions, but that is outside the any banking systems and all. So now we are also working with the NRLM ecosystem, that how do we digitize and get all these transactions in a digital form, so that one could identify these entrepreneurs at a more central place, and not the one by one we look for the entrepreneurs and all. So we are pivoting quite a lot on the SSG platforms.
Kanika, very quick one, and the organizers, I'll request you 5 more minutes for audience questions, please. At least 1 or 2. It'll be a pity if we don't hear anything from the audience. So after
really,
Kanika,
really rapidly, I think collective action will be successful when we are very clear on who the point of center is. I think we have to remember the entrepreneur remains the point of center, and it's their power imbalance that we have to address. I think the second important point, particularly with respect to finance, I think Anjani mentioned that there's already a lot of assets and resources existing in the ecosystem. And can we collectively, because collectively we can take that risk to enable what kind of market behavior do we want in terms of finance? How do you incentivize the borrower? How do you incentivize, what kind of behavior do you want the ecosystem to have? And I think that becomes like a key thing for us in the future. And I agree with Anjani on, district at the meso level is a very important unit of change. And where cluster level federations have already been established, so much work is done. But I think we might have to ask a larger question of not just looking at them as setting up businesses. Acha, okay, we have a cluster level federation, now we set up, but how they can become at the forefront of entrepreneurship.
thanks. Audience questions. I'm taking the liberty, Vipin. Okay, he's given me 2 minutes. There's a hand there. Yes, please.
My name is Shishir Kumar Sahu. I'm working in Pradhan. So the panelists talked about Manrega. I work in village where actually putting your hand in the soil is not regarded as a job which is of dignity. First. Second, I belong to a village in Orissa. Recently, all this paddy harvesting job was going on.
Can you ask your question, please? We just have 2 minutes. So
okay. So my question is that we are talking about technology. So actually, technology is facilitating employment, or it is actually a threat to employment? That's my question.
That's another panel discussion, actually. But any other questions?
But just quickly, I think it's all depends on how do you use technology. Certainly, it disrupts the lot of work and all. But I think it's also important to see how you use that technology. It kills certain kind of job, but it also creates some different kind of jobs and all. So there are losers, there are gainers in that aspect.
Yeah, I think that's a wrong question. I think what we have to ask is how can we enable technology for entrepreneurship? Jobs might get disrupted, but I've seen that a lot of innovative ways in rural entrepreneurs are using technology. So how are we providing them access? They're using YouTube, they're using e-commerce, they're selling on Amazon now, and they're understanding that if they have to grow, they will have to do that. So how do we build that understanding is important.
India is famous for jugaad, and jugaad is always done to improve the processes. So I think one can't just blame technology. We'll have to be, futuristic in our kind of outlook. Thanks a lot. Yes, one more question, please. There are no questions. Okay, we are available after the session and happy to have a conversation. Thanks a lot. Thanks to the audience and the panelists.
I wanted to thank you and all the panelists. Thank you for coming and highlighting the opportunity to build large numbers of entrepreneurs who can be job creators, identifying pathways to capitalize them. And I am with you. Technology, we should use it as much as we can. And I think his question was aligned to AI. Maybe he was thinking in that direction, because that is a threat to most of us, people like me who do content for a living, maybe. But yeah, another conversation, another day. So we would like to thank you and present a little token of our appreciation to you. Please. We can take a group photo also. Yeah.